It has been quite some time since I was this excited for an Assassin's Creed game. I think the last time I was this hyped was probably before Valhalla launched, almost 6 years ago. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk about some points as to why I'm looking forward to the launch of Black Flag Resynced, and why I think you should be too. I just want to give a shout out and thank you to my channel members as always. Thank you so much for watching and supporting, I appreciate it tremendously. With that said, let's begin. One of the major reasons why I, and I assume many other people, love the original Black Flag is that there still really isn't any other game that captures the pirate fantasy the way Black Flag does. At its core, Black Flag is still an Assassin's Creed story. It has all the pieces that you would expect. The assassins, the Templars, issue artifacts, and a protagonist who slowly gets pulled into something far bigger than himself. But what made the original stand out was everything surrounding that story. Black Flag took the structure of an Assassin's Creed game and dropped it directly into the golden age of piracy, and somehow the combination worked perfectly. The game doesn't just use pirates as a backdrop, it fully commits to the fantasy. From the moment you take control of Edward and sail around the Caribbean, the entire experience hits differently. One minute you're sailing through open water with your crew singing shanties, and the next you're caught in the middle of a naval battle while waves crash around the ship and cannons are firing from every direction. And outside the main story, the world constantly pulls you in. You don't just move from mission to mission, you get distracted in the best ways possible. You see a ship in the distance and decide to engage with it to get some resources. Or maybe you find a treasure map and spend some time travelling to a tiny island to find buried treasure. Even simple things like upgrading the jackdaw or exploring shipwrecks end up feeling memorable, because the atmosphere sells the fantasy so well. What makes Black Flag special is how naturally all of this fits together. The pirate fantasy never feels disconnected from the Assassin's Creed side of the game. Edward Kenway himself is the perfect example of that balance, which leads me on to the next point. Edward is genuinely one of the best protagonists Assassin's Creed has ever had. Back when Black Flag originally released in 2013, Edward immediately stood out because he wasn't really an assassin, at least not in the ways players were used to. Before that, most Assassin's Creed protagonists were already deeply connected to the Brotherhood or driven by some larger purpose from the very beginning. Edward was different. He starts off as a pirate first and foremost, someone chasing money, freedom, status, and the idea of living a better life. At the time, that was really a fresh direction for the franchise. Now in modern day Assassin's Creed games, playing as characters who aren't traditional assassins has become pretty common, but what made Edward work so well was the writing behind him. He doesn't just feel different for the sake of being different, he feels human. He's flawed, selfish at times, reckless, and constantly making decisions that come back to haunt him. But because of that, his journey feels far more believable and personal. Honestly, if you've never played the original Black Flag before, I'm kind of jealous. Getting to experience Edward's story for the first time is something special because his development throughout the game is what really makes him memorable. Without spoiling anything, he changes a lot over the course of the story. The version of Edward you meet at the beginning is not the same person you see later on, and the game handles that progression naturally instead of forcing it. A huge part of why that growth works so well comes down to the characters around him. Black Flag has this cast of personalities that feel genuinely important to Edward's life and journey. His relationships don't just exist to move the plot forward, they shape who he becomes. And honestly, that's something a lot of modern games struggle to capture. So many of the main protagonists today can feel emotionally distant or one-dimensional, but Edward always feels grounded because of the people surrounding him. That's why so many fans still rank him among the very best protagonists the series has ever had, and in my opinion he's easily in the top 3. He's charismatic and entertaining enough to carry the pirate fantasy side of the game, but he also has the emotional range to carry the story when things become more serious. The biggest addition has to be the new endgame missions. From what we've heard so far, there will be 8 new missions centered around the pirate hunter Robert Miller and his pursuit of Edward Kenway. On its own, that already sounds like an interesting setup because it gives players a brand new conflict to experience after the main story. But what makes it even more exciting is that these missions apparently won't just be action focused. They also seem to add more detail to existing characters and events, especially when it comes to Blackbeard's role in the narrative. One of the most exciting things about returning to a beloved game is getting new context for stories and characters you already know, and these missions sound like they'll do exactly that. What's encouraging is that the new content doesn't stop with the endgame. There are also entirely new side missions being added, including recruitment missions involving Lucy Baldwin, the Padre, and Tobias Deadman Smith. One of Black Flag's strengths was always the feeling that the Caribbean was filled with different personalities and stories, so having more character focused content should help make the world feel even richer. If these missions are handled well, they could become some of the most interesting parts of the remake for me. However, as much as I am very excited to experience these new stories, I do have some concerns regarding the quality of them due to the fact that this is new content, and we have already seen that the cutscene quality for them are the usual we have seen in the RPG games. But I will highlight this more in one of my upcoming videos. Anyway, then there are the new character questlines. This is actually one of the additions I'm personally most interested in, because it gives the developers an opportunity to spend more time with some of Black Flag's most beloved characters. The Blackbeard focused questline is obviously going to attract a lot of attention, but the one I am most excited for is the Steed Bonnet storyline. In the original game, Steed was a memorable presence, but it also felt like there was more that could have been explored. Edward never really reflected much on Steed's outcome, so seeing that relationship expanded upon could add a lot to the overall story. When you put everything together, we're looking at roughly 6 hours of additional narrative content. That's not a small bonus tacked onto the side. That's a substantial amount of new material for both returning players and newcomers. And that's before we even get into the new islands being added to the world, which brings me on to the next point, which is that it is looking like this is going to be an open world actually done right. One of the things that made the original Black Flag stand out in 2013 was the sheer scale of its world. At the time, having an open world this large where you could freely sail between islands, explore settlements, discover hidden locations and get distracted by things on the horizon felt incredibly ambitious. More importantly, it felt like a world that actually suited the fantasy the game was trying to deliver. There were plenty of collectibles scattered throughout the map, including animus fragments, treasure maps, messages in a bottle, Mayan stelae, and of course treasure chests. But overall, I think Black Flag struck a fairly good balance. Exploring islands felt rewarding because there was usually a mix of activities to discover rather than just one repetitive task repeated over and over again. What has me interested in Resynced though is that it looks like the developers have recognised where they can improve that formula. One of the biggest criticisms of modern open world games is that they often fill their maps with hundreds of icons and question marks that all lead to essentially the same thing. You clear a camp, open a chest, collect a reward and then move on to the next nearly identical location. After a while, exploration starts feeling more like a checklist. From what we've seen so far, Resynced appears to be moving in the opposite direction. There are fewer chests than there were in the original game, and the rewards seem far more meaningful. Instead of constantly opening chests for small amounts of currency, players can now find new swords, pistols, trinkets, and I think even new outfits too. To me, that's a much more exciting reason to explore. Finding a new weapon that can give your character a new look is always going to feel more rewarding than collecting another pile of money, at least it is in my opinion. A good example of this is Matanzas. In the original Black Flag, the area contained 4 chests, 3 animus fragments, a secret, a Mayan stele, and a viewpoint. In Resynced though, the animus fragments appear to be gone. There are 2 fewer chests and it looks like an additional secret has been added instead. That might sound like a small change on paper, but it reflects a bigger philosophy. Rather than filling the world with collectibles for the sake of it, the focus seems to be on making discoveries feel more meaningful. And honestly, that's exactly what I want from an open world game. Give me a beautiful world to sail through, interesting islands to explore, and a healthy variety of activities, but don't overwhelm the map with unnecessary clutter. If Resynced can maintain that balance, it could end up being a great example of how to build a large open world without falling into the trap of endless bloat. Another reason I think people should be excited for Black Flag Resynced is the improved naval combat. Even though a lot of the discussion around Black Flag focuses on Edward, the story, or the pirate fantasy, none of that would have worked nearly as well without the naval gameplay that tied everything together. Back in 2013, the naval combat was one of the biggest reasons Black Flag stood out from other open world games. While previous Assassin's Creed titles had experimented with ship mechanics, Black Flag was the game that fully committed to them. The Jackdaw wasn't just a vehicle used to travel from one location to another, it felt like an extension of the player. Upgrading it, customizing it, and taking it into increasingly dangerous battles became one of the most satisfying parts of the entire experience. What's encouraging about Resynced is that it doesn't look like it's trying to completely reinvent that formula. The core mechanics that made the original so enjoyable appear to still be intact. You'll still be lining up broadside attacks, firing mortars, boarding enemy ships, and fighting through storms across the Caribbean. That's exactly what most fans wanted because the original system was already incredibly strong. Where Resynced seems to be improving things is in the extra layers of depth and variety being added on top. The addition of alternate fire modes such as shrapnel barrels, bow chaser cannons, and heated shot could make encounters feel a lot more dynamic. Instead of relying on the same tactics throughout the entire game, players will have more tools available and more choices to make in combat. Different situations may call for different approaches, which should help naval battles remain engaging even dozens of hours into the experience. The improvements to boarding also look promising. One small detail I've noticed is how much smoother rope swinging appears to be. It might seem like a minor change, but those moments are a huge part of what makes Black Flag feel cinematic. Crippling an enemy ship and then swinging aboard to finish the job is one of the most iconic parts of the game, so making those transitions feel more fluid can only improve the overall experience. Visually though, this is where Resynced looks like a massive step forward. The naval combat footage we've seen so far looks absolutely incredible. The effects during battles are far more dramatic, with explosions, smoke, debris and weather all combining to create a much more intense atmosphere, and it is by far more impressive during storms. Ship battles were already exciting when huge waves and dark skies rolled in, but with the upgraded visuals and destruction effects, these encounters look like they could become some of the most cinematic moments in the entire game. So the naval systems don't seem to be changed much, but what has been changed is the tailing missions. Now don't get me wrong, I don't think these missions were inherently bad. In fact, some of them worked really well because they gave players an opportunity to learn more about the characters and other events. The problem was never the concept itself, the problem was how often the game used it. When you look at the numbers, it's easy to understand why people felt that way. Out of the game's 45 main memories, around 24% of the core story involved some form of tailing or eavesdropping objective. That's a significant portion of the game, and over time, those missions could start to feel repetitive, especially when they often failed you for making a single mistake. That's where the changes in Resynced seems really smart. Instead of instantly failing a mission because you were spotted or lost sight of your target, the game now appears to give players alternative ways to progress. If you're discovered, you can actually engage the target in combat. By defeating them and looting information from their body, you'll still be able to obtain the intel needed to continue the mission. To me, this is exactly the kind of modernisation a remake or remaster should be making. It doesn't completely remove the original mechanic, and it doesn't fundamentally change the mission structure. If you enjoy the stealth aspect of tailing someone through a city and gathering information the intended way, you can still do that. But if things do go wrong, you're no longer forced to sit through a loading screen and replay the entire sequence from the beginning. It also feels much more natural from a gameplay perspective. Edward is a pirate and a highly capable fighter, so it makes sense that he would have more than one way of obtaining information. Whether you choose stealth or direct confrontation, the mission can continue without completely breaking the flow of the game. I wouldn't be surprised if there are additional incentives for successfully completing the tailing sections as intended, perhaps through bonus rewards or extra currency, although that's purely speculation on my part because I'm not really sure if that is actually the case. Regardless, the important thing is that players now have freedom in how they approach these encounters, and that's a change that should make the overall experience feel far less frustrating than it did in the original. So yeah, I am really looking forward to playing Black Flag Resynced. Let me know down in the comments your thoughts or concerns about the game. Thank you again to my channel members for your continuous support on the channel, as it helps out more than you know. Thank you to everyone for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.